Hey everybody, hope you're all doing well. My name is Steven and this is the Storytime channel. Today we have some malicious compliance stories and our first story of the day is by AussieBloke777. Don't tell me my dog is fat. It was many years ago now that I was a locum veterinarian in a small suburban veterinary clinic. For the most part, the clients were a pleasure to work with, were receptive to the advice and instructions given to them by the staff in regards to their pets, and it generally made my time working there a placid experience. Every rare once in a while though, a client's account would be flagged as non-compliant. This usually meant a client who didn't follow medication instructions, post-operative procedures, scheduled rechecks, general health advice, and so forth, usually resulting in cases not progressing as well as they should have. Of course, some of these clients would also complain about said poor outcome, and the fault was, of course, never theirs. Enter one particular Miss Non-Com. Since I was only a part-time locum, working every other weekend at the time at this particular clinic, I seldom saw a client more than once unless they specifically requested to see me again. As such, I had never met Miss Non-Com before, but plastered at the top of her file was the dreaded non-compliant. Miss Non-Com owned a Jack Russell Terrier that had an extensive history with the clinic, and as I browsed the history of the patient prior to the consultation to familiarize myself with them, it was painfully obvious that Jack was far too fat to be healthy. In fact, there was enough of Jack to make another Jack, with some Jack to spare. Jack was due his annual vaccination and checkup, and so I asked them to enter the consultation room, which they did at a leisurely pace due to the fact that Jack was barely able to keep up with Miss Non-Com, who was herself not particularly fast due to her own bodily dimensions. It was somewhat apparent why Jack was struggling with weight issues when his own owner was apparently having the same difficulties. Typically, in a situation like this, I would be careful as I could to not offend the owner or make any assumptions about their current bodily state, as it's common for large owners to likewise have large pets, and suggestions have to be made appropriately without blatantly putting too much blame on the owner. However, my desire to be tactful went straight out the window when Miss Non-Com, with a sour expression on her face, which also appeared to have the remnants of a candy bar smeared on one cheek, heaved her panting Jack onto the table and greeted me with an irritable, "Jack needs his needles and don't tell me my dog is fat." Very well. Jack was only 5 years old, far too young to be the size he was, though no pet of any age should ever be as fat as he was. And his history had revealed a host of maladies that resulted from his size. Abrasive skin damage of his chest and belly from dragging on the ground, skin-fold dermatitis, recurrent yeast infections of his ear canals that were squeezed shut by a neck that was no longer a neck but merely a globular extension of his thorax, degenerative joint disease, upper airway disease. The list went on. Now, unfortunately, one shortcoming of the clinic I worked at was the senior veterinarian there who owned the practice was a very senior fellow indeed who had long lost his passion for the job and seemed to be content to just let things slide with the more difficult clients, treating the patient symptomatically rather than addressing the underlying problem. I decided that now was the time to assert my new blood. I have a habit that as I gather the history of the patient from the last time they were seen, I dictate it to myself as I type it into the history of the file. This gives the client a chance to correct anything I may have misheard or add something they remember as I repeat it. And thus I did with Jack, complying with Miss Non-Com's desire that I do not tell her that her dog was fat. The patient at presentation of the consultation is morbidly obese and at weigh-in is half a kilo heavier than at last consultation, presenting with moderate to severe dyspnea, likely complicated by excess adipose tissue deposition in and around the thorax. I looked up from my typing. How much are you feeding Jack these days? Miss Non-Com shot me a poisonous look, but perhaps she hadn't met me before and thought perhaps I hadn't quite heard her entering remark, responded, "He's getting 2 meals a day, what you recommended last time I was here. Should all be in your records there." It certainly was. The amount recommended should have been fine to encourage weight loss, even in the face of limited exercise. So I forged on with my history writing. Patient is consuming recommended diet but has failed to shed any excess body mass since last seen 5 months ago. Another sideways glance from Miss Noncom, and this time her cheeks flushed a little. I proceeded with the physical exam of the patient, and with each problem I noted as a result of his being overweight, I used a different synonym. Hefty, rotund, enlarged, bloated, and a variety of other fat but not fat words were used as I typed up the findings. And in my peripheral vision, I could see Miss Noncom's complexion slowly turn from pink to tomato to beetroot. It was when I reached the point of Jack carrying a lot of weight to the opera that she exploded.
How dare you? I told you not to tell me he's fat. There's nothing I can do about it, so stop telling me.
I mustered my most pained look I could manage. But ma'am, I never once used the word you explicitly told me not to use, and as for there being nothing that can be done, the history states you've refused testing to determine if he has thyroid, adrenal, or other disease that may be complicating his weight loss. This really isn't in his best interests. If money is an issue, we do have payment plans that can help spread out the cost of such testing. I didn't get to finish, as Miss Noncom scooped Jack off the table, berating me and the entire staff of the clinic as she rumbled her person out of the clinic as fast as she could, and swearing that my boss would hear about this. No sooner had the door shut, I heard the nursing staff burst out giggling and my boss poke his head out of the adjoining consult room where I'm sure he'd heard the entire exchange. He simply sighed, shrugged, and said, "Well, I didn't hear you say the word fat once," before closing the door. I later learned that Miss Noncom had returned the following week when I was not present, and not only had Jack vaccinated after complaining to my boss, but also conceded to having blood work done, which revealed an underactive thyroid. Jack was subsequently started on thyroid supplementation, and by the following year was a much healthier and appropriate weight. Well, I'm glad that OP spurred the change for the better of Jack. In the end, OP's direct actions, whether they were slightly rude or not, which I don't even think they were, led to a fundamental change in the quality of the pet's life, and that's the most important thing. That's what they're at that job for. So good job, OP. Our next story is by MJR Silver. I was trying to help you get some money from the dead laptop and you treated me like that? I usually do computer repairs at home and usually at a much cheaper price than at any store. One day, a girl from outside the parish where I live calls me, saying that one of my contacts gave her mine and that she had a laptop computer to repair. I told her to bring the laptop and I'll see what I can do. Turns out, the repair is way too expensive, even to my standards because of its age, a early 2000s NEC. So I suggest handing her the laptop, disassembled and cataloged with the prices of each part, so she can make some profit from that dead laptop on OLX, like the Craigslist from the USA. She says no. Translated conversation via messenger. "Give me the laptop as I gave it to you." I say, in that case, it's 35 euros for labor. Note, I always inform my clients that I charge 35 euros as an estimated budget, fully deducted from the repair price if that is the case. Note 1.2, before all this discussion, I was not going to charge this fee.
But you didn't fix it.
No, but I spent an hour and a half opening and diagnosing it, and it will probably take me another 30 minutes to reassemble it. Her boyfriend joins the conversation after some arguments. "You know what? You can shove the laptop up your butt," plus some choice words. I screenshotted all the conversation, including the last one from her BF, and sometime later I had it assembled, waiting for them to pay me the fee. Then, 4 months later, she comes back on Messenger asking again for the laptop and still not willing to pay me the fee, to which I reply by attaching the last screenshot of her boyfriend's reply. "Are you sure you want the laptop full of crap?" She blocked me. After that, I threw it in the trash. Note 2, he was the real owner, and by "shove it up your butt" here where I live, it means that I do whatever I want with it. "Well, sir, I've never done that procedure before in my diagnostic work, but if you think it's worth a shot, just make sure to bring the 35 euros when you come to pick it up." But yeah, in reality, if you did repair work and they just left it sitting there for 4 months after refusing to pay the 35 euros to come get it in the first place, why would they even be expecting you to still have it? How long should you hold on to that stuff? Especially with the way they treated you over Messenger, telling you to go shove it up your butt. If anything, that would inspire me to dump that thing somewhere in the middle of nowhere rather than try and hold on to it. But OP is trying to be honest and hold the business, so I totally get still having it after all that time. Our next story is by Meltdown. More oil? You got it. It just occurred to me to post this story to the sub today. Back in the 90s, I worked at a Subway restaurant and had a friend that would periodically come in for food. We inventoried bread, so we did have to pay, but I rang it up as a cold cut, cheapest on the menu, and hooked him up with free everything else. Definitely got his $2.10 worth. One day, he decides he wants to try salad oil, so I put a bit on his sandwich. The next time, he asks for more salad oil, so I put it on. This goes on for a couple of weeks off and on. He wasn't in every night, and progressively asks me to put more and more oil on. The day of reckoning came when he comes in after work, tells me his order and says, "You literally cannot put too much oil on there," and goes off to wash his hands in the bathroom. Okay, dude, you asked for it. I probably had the biggest poop-eating grin of all time on my face as I unscrewed the bottle and dumped the remainder of the oil out all over his sub, folding the corners of the paper up so the pool of oil stayed put. I triple wrapped that sucker and bagged it up. He came out, paid, then sat down. He said nothing, merely stared at it for a few seconds, then started eating. He said not a word, but I could tell he was trying to not let me hear him gag. I, of course, heard everything. Eventually, he said goodbye and left. He didn't speak of it outside work, but the next time he comes in and orders, I go to reach for the bottle and he stops me. Dude, no, you broke me. You win. I was literally crapping oil all night long. To this day, he still gags when he thinks about salad oil. That's a real phenomenon when you eat too much of something, maybe not all in one sitting in a huge serving, but I've definitely had foods where I've eaten too much in a day or maybe even in one serving, where afterwards I could not go back to that food or enjoy it at all. To be fair though, not gonna lie, I do get a lot of oil on my subs when I go to Subway. And our final story of the day is by Anstecker Vlostoff. You're not to get involved in your mom's Facebook stuff. My dad's words years ago when I started a discussion with my mom over some dumb racist stuff she said on Facebook. Facebook brings out the worst in my mother, who in real life used to be a lovely woman, but over the years got lost in her echo chamber of stupidity. Today, there was an illegal protest in my city. A protest organized on Facebook by the lowest of the low of our society. We have a group of about 100 delusionals in the country who are actually willing to get from behind their keyboards and disrupt public transport in my city any opportunity they can get in the name of the people. My parents, not a part of the 100 but seem to be well on their way, went to today's protest. The protest was illegal. They were told to separate and leave. They didn't. They got arrested. They didn't have any form of identification on them, so they were not allowed to leave. My dad called for the first time this afternoon, asking me to go to their place, pick up the IDs, and then go to the police station. I asked if this was about the Facebook event. He said yes. I said, I better not get involved then. Hung up and ignored his next 17 calls. My aunt apparently went to pick them up later tonight, and everyone's pissed at me saying I'm a traitor except for Grandma, who called to say she misses me and I haven't been able to get the grin off my face. I'm not even really sure what the best way to handle this kind of situation is when it's somebody that you care about so dearly, but it's so severely wrong in seemingly every way. What can you really do when you care about the person, but there's really no way to make them stop? Is it something you just kind of give up on? I guess OP really said enough when they called 17 times and it's their parents, and they just ignored it. At some point, if it doesn't just naturally occur to their parents that what they're doing is wrong and ruining the potential relationship, what more can you do? But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. So if you have a favorite story of the day, let me know which story and why in the comments down below. But besides that, if you enjoyed the video, please consider giving it a like, and if you haven't, subscribe and turn notifications on so you'll never miss an upcoming video. No matter what you do, whether it's just viewing the video, liking, subscribing, turning notifications on, I appreciate the heck out of it. Every little thing that you do helps the channel grow that much more, and I can't thank you enough for it. So until next time, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll be right here next time on the Storytime channel.